everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure and an honor when Brendan and Helena return to the show. Brendan will read first and then Helena. Brendan Constantine is a poet based in Los Angeles. His work has appeared in Poetry, The Nation, Best American Poetry, Tin House, Plowshares, and Poetry a Day, among other journals. A popular performer, Brendan has presented his work to audiences throughout the U.S. and Europe, also appearing on NPR's All Things Considered, TED, Ed, numerous podcasts, and YouTube. He currently teaches at the Windward School and the LA County Museum of Art. His fifth collection, The Opposites Game, is forthcoming from Red Hand Press. Here's a brilliant poet, Brendan Constantine.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you again, Harry. Hello, Hélène. Good to see you. It's really a delight to be with you. Thanks so much for inviting us to be with you today. And I'm looking forward to this. And hello to everybody who's hanging out with us this afternoon. Let me get started. I always like to start with a couple of poems by other people. This first one is very, very short. I've got two really tiny ones by other authors. This first one's by A. Houseman, and it's from A Shropshire Lad. Into my heart an air that kills from yon far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What spires, what farms are those? That is the land of lost content. I see it shining plain, the happy highways where I went and cannot come again. And that one, I think, fits very nicely with one written much later by Kay Sage. I think they speak to the same discontent in a different way. This is a tiny poem by Kay Sage called Smoke. It is bad enough to have a cigarette and no match, but it is worse to want a cigarette while you are smoking one. Anyway, that's how I like to think when I'm sharing work by other authors. That's kind of how I'm earning my seat. Okay, this first poem is a poem about all the poems that I did not bring with me today. Now, this is called The Poem for R. The poem on the lake. The poem with a checkered blanket. The poem in which a great painting is described and then sold at auction, leaving the poem empty, unreadable. The poem in which the moon compares itself to people and their things. The poem about a cow named Alan. The poem shaped like a field. The poem in which Christ pockets all the money donated in his name and walks off muttering to himself. The poem with room for milk and sugar. The poem in its mid-50s. The poem written in a strict form based on the stages of grief, emphasizing meter and denial. The poem in which a dog returns to say, love is a kind of tennis ball thrown into the night, a thing glowing in grass just bright enough to find it, but still faint enough to be lost with no blame. There is no blame, the dog says. You were busy, and I didn't live long. Be happy we met at all. The poem made of red cups. The poem written on a hat. The poem prescribed by a doctor who makes a second appointment to read it to you under supervision. The poem tied up in traffic. The poem in which the word skull is capitalized. The poem punishable by song. The poem in which the word hyperbole is pronounced so incorrectly, people actually die. The poem that doesn't end with the ghost of a dog. The poem of exquisite regret, the poem that delivers itself on the way to hospital, the poem of swift justice, the poem of just swiftness, the poem lovely as the letter R. And this next one. I feel like I would like to tell you things about it, but nothing will help, so I'll just read the poem. As my friend Rick Lupert likes to say sometimes before reading a poem, he'll say to the audience, "I'd like to make a disclaimer, but I can't think of one." This is ahead of the weather. The clouds are stacked on the hills. Gaunt milkweed and switchgrass trade a whisper as we pass. You are wearing that coat I always liked, the one with a red collar and L-shaped pockets. For a few steps, we share the same thought. Surely by now, someone has figured out how to keep a moment alive, maybe in a lab full of tubes and beeping. If the man who owns this field has learned to keep birds away without a gun, how to tell lies convincingly to a horse, even how to feed oxygen to his wife when the nurses are busy, then certainly the technology exists to keep our arms linked and the grass from finishing its secret. And then a little lightning comes. We slow for the sounds, have our own thoughts again. Mine are about the day you bought that coat. It was summer and you didn't need it, but that collar, the pockets, the small belt in the back, like a sea captain, were clearly meant for you. You pull your arms tighter. The whole world, you say, is written down somewhere. I'd like to read not necessarily a dark poem, but perhaps let's say an overcast poem. This comes from quite a while ago. This is a poem from a book called Calamity Joe, which is really one of my favorites of the whole experience. What it was like writing the poems for it got 20 years ago, and the process of getting to assemble the book and publishing it. It was just a great experience, and I don't know. And perhaps this is to digress just for a minute. This wherever I was in my life at this time, and maybe this is something we can speak about later when we have a chance to talk with Harry. Sometimes there's such a vivid sense when you're writing that you're inspired and you're inventing things, and you have this. At least I have a sense of a wingspan sometimes, where I really feel like I feel as though the ideas are coming and things are landing on the page, and the means of conveying what I want to say is opening up very easily. And then there are other times when I'm working on a poem and I feel less like I'm making things up, and strangely like what I'm writing about are things that I'm remembering, even though I may be writing about things that did not occur. You know, I'm in the pursuit of an emotional truth rather than a practical truth. And I guess that truth is so familiar that it still feels like recall, even though I might be writing a poem that has characters in it and a storyline that I'm inventing out of whole cloth. And yet they feel so authentic. They feel like something I went through. Anyways, much of writing Calamity Joe was like that, or rather like feeling my way through a house that had the lights off. And as I moved along the walls, you know, I could see where there was already a door and already a window, and these things were all in place. And I was just learning how to recognize them rather than, say, building them. This is from Calamity Joe. This is called A Horse Named Death. And it It references the point in Revelations where the four horsemen appear, one of whom is death. And behold, a pale horse, and the name it said on him was Death, and hell followed with him. A horse named Death. The man said, what else could he name him? The beast had no color. Lethal white, it's called, because the things hardly live a whole day. But this one got up. He raised himself like a church and made for the dark of the barn, not a whiff to his mother. We didn't think she'd take to him, but she followed him back there and began to teach. You can tell a racehorse by his gait. This one could drag a tractor out to sea. Not that it mattered, not like you could get a jock to go near him. A horse that could only race at night. A horse with red eyes. A homebred named for the end of times, not to mention the sport. It was worse than blasphemy. What could he do, the man asked us. What did God expect him to do? So the man races him against us. You're driving home by one of his fields. You can't avoid his fields. Just trying to push aside enough night to get to bed, and the horse comes. He flashes up beside you like a bedside lamp, like a secret you thought was kept. Even if you don't stop to breathe into your hands, he passes you. If you speed up and curse him for every lie you ever told, he passes you. He passes you like you're falling the other way. And this is a much newer poem that I feel kind of goes with it. This is very much a poem of these times, I should say. This is a poem called Turn by Turn. I have to say, they're making me say it. What surprised me about hell was my phone still worked. I had full bars, and GPS found me right away, between pride and envy. No lower, thanks be to someone. Of course, when I asked for the ride home, the little wheel just spun and spun. As of this morning, I've taken 2,496,234 steps, mostly around a museum with no set hours. Yes, they have a museum, and it's even more fascinating than you'd expect. Endlessly so. So, just a couple more, and I'll turn it over to my friend Hélène, who I'm looking forward to hearing from. I'm fortunate enough that I get to teach in a variety of places, and I've been 20 years at a high school called Windward. I'm a teaching artist over at the Museum of Modern Art, where I've been off and on since about 2000, 2001. But I also get to travel a great deal. I was fortunate enough just to speak at Cal Arts, and where I was invited back as an alumnus from Vermont College of Fine Arts. I do all kinds of teaching in many different environments. I also get to offer a creative writing class at the Midnight Mission downtown. That's something I'm proud of. And some of these places, not all of them, but a few of them have policies now for what to do if there's an incident involving a gun and how you're supposed to behave. This is a poem about a little bit about that, but there's also a nod to the great mysterious algorithms that surround us. You know, how you can be talking to somebody perhaps about flowers, and then you go pick up your phone, and suddenly on your phone there's an ad for a florist in front of you, and you wonder, am I being listened to? This poem is called Active Shooter. It takes 12 minutes to start my mother's day. From the time I wake her to when I set a tray of coffee, toast, a soft-boiled egg. One American will be shot in that time, and another 2 before I clear it all away. This morning, I find her already wakeful, taking aim with a black remote. On her bed-sized television, the words "active shooter" caption a pair of school flags and policemen crouched in a sandbox. My mother says the words aloud. 12 minutes later, our telephones buzz with ads for activewear. Should I buy her a bulletproof shawl? It's $40, soft, elegant, tactical, good for seniors on the run. Someday there will be more of us in poems than anywhere else. I wonder if the university will ask me to carry a gun, which is to say, I wonder what quitting will be like. Will I be able to live on what I've made? How long before the world is American? The TV has filled with mothers. I blink and realize I'm late with breakfast, late to cut bread, grind beans, late to boil water and put a bright egg in the middle. My mother repeats the words and I step away, keeps saying them like playing out a rope for me to follow back to her, soft, elegant, tactical. Dear God of the gas stove, dear clock of blue fire, thank you for what darkens in me every day. And I guess I'll just offer one more poem. And this is it goes out to my love, Julia. And yeah, it's short. It's going to go by pretty quick, and then I'll be honored to hand things off to Hélène. This is a poem called "A Tour de Force." I got a book and can't make myself read it, even though my lover swears it's good, even though the cover says we might all beautifully belong somewhere. Imagine if everything you saw was printed inside your skull where people could see it after you died. When you do a lot of cocaine, it feels like that's true. Like the gallery is struggling to stay open because pipes keep breaking and the floor is always wet. That's what I remember, anyway. It's been a while since I had enough money to be that beautiful and echoing. Of course, you can't find anything in my head that looks like a sunset or a toy horse. It's all just goo in there. That's what memories become, dark water and milk. You could no more read it back than you could drink the ink from a novel and know who loved who. Thank you.
Thank you for such a brilliant reading. Your poetry is inventive. It's captivating. There's humor, love, among many other things. You have such great clarity. What caused you to become a poet?
Oh, my goodness. Well, it was I have to say it was a comparatively late detonation, but I've been loaded up for it, I guess, since the beginning. My parents actually met at a staged reading of Cuban revolutionary poets in upstate New York in 1952. They'd been asked to perform the work of a poet who became Cuba's national poet, Nicolas Guillen. And there was always poetry around the household. My parents were just as likely to offer poems at bedtime as they were stories. And so I was pretty much surrounded by it. But after having tried all kinds of different kinds of art, I was told I had talent for a lot of things growing up. But for some reason, there were a lot of things that while I liked to do them, as soon as they became very hard work, I would back off. It was assumed I would be an actor, and I was trained to be an actor for a long time. But as soon as that got to a certain point of difficulty, I backed off. Photography fascinated me. And when I had to really understand the mathematics of working with light, I backed off. Martial arts were great until the third karate lesson. But poetry was the thing that after it became difficult, after the gaps in my talent were revealed to me, after all the praise and encouragement went away, when I was confronted with the mountain of information and craft that I would not live long enough to learn, I still thought, I still want to do this. I still want to do this, and that happened. I was about. I can tell you the month and year. It was November of 1994. I was sitting in a cafe in London, and I had a notebook out, and I was writing, and I suddenly realized that without thinking about it, I'd come to this cafe every day for weeks and sat down and wrote without really thinking about it. And what I was writing, they weren't poems, and they weren't stories, and they weren't songs. They were something in between. And I went, oh, you're writing poems. And so it's, I guess it's 31 years later. But yeah, it was November of 1994, and I don't know what clicked, but suddenly I was bit by the bug, and I have not been cured.
Well, you've done such great work in poetry, and also also in the poetry community and beyond. And
that's kind of you to say. Thank you.
There are so many people who do not understand poetry for one reason or another. What would you say to help people understand what poetry is, to help them get into it a little bit more?
I think that a lot of folks can be confronted by a poem and get, that clearly the poet is speaking in a special way. And many people, without really thinking about it, if you put a poem in front of them and you tell them, I'm showing you a poem, they will assume that they have to pay attention in a very particular way. And I think many people sort of assume that a poem has to be decoded somehow, that like a crossword puzzle, or a daily jumble, they're supposed to be figuring out something that's hiding under it. And I think and that's largely because, of the way, I think some of it might have to do with the way poetry is taught. And I think also that sometimes a poem can also, if you're not ready for it, participate in that deception, because it will have all the trappings of a narrative sometimes. It will have all the trappings of a story, and then it will go somewhere. And its priority is clearly not the payoff of a story. A poem may tell a story, but that won't be the point of the poem. I think if you feel like you don't understand poetry and you don't know what's going on, it's important to remember all the writer is trying to do is convey a feeling. That's what's most important. And if you understand that the poet just wants you to be in the poem and experience it, something I use in the classroom all the time is when I'm working with people that are new to poetry, I say, you'll notice that in poetry, a group of lines is called a stanza. And a stanza is an Italian word, which just means room. The stanzas of the poem are the rooms of the poem. And if nothing else, that should convey a poem is not a thing to solve. A poem is a place to dwell. We just want you to be in it. In the same sense that, as Keats said, if you go swimming, you don't get into the lake, swim to the other side, get out and say, okay, I've solved swimming for the day. No, when you say you're going swimming, it really means you're just sort of hanging out in the water. You're floating, you're enjoying weightlessness. You might even be delighting in the mystery of what is in darkness below your feet. Going swimming means you're going to go be somewhere. Reading a poem means you're going to go dwell in it. And so I would say, just allow yourself to be in it. Don't try to figure it out. Just sit there and float for a while.
Well, I can see why you're such a great teacher. And so we have a couple of minutes left before Helena comes on. And as we all know, here in LA in particular, in America in general, the poetry is overshadowed by movies, TV, music. So how do you, as a poet who is one of the popular poets with all your teaching and traveling, and how do you deal with that?
It's funny. I came across an article in 2012 that was at that time 100 years old. It was an article from the New York Times published in 1912. And it was a review of poetry books that had just come out in 1912. And what astonished me was that the reviewer was saying, rather, with a sense of fatigue in the writing, he said, well, nowadays, unless poetry is able to compete with ragtime, we really struggle to read it. And I was like, oh my God, we've always had this problem. Ragtime? That 113 years ago, there was a reviewer going, my God, it was so much better for poetry before this, but now that we have ragtime, who can concentrate? I really, for all of the noise, I really don't think that poetry is going anywhere. It may seem like it's easily eclipsed. What's wonderful, though, about it is that, in so many instances, so much of our technology seems to be a means of just reinventing the blank page. And so I would say there's probably a lot of poetry to come that we may not recognize at first as the new, as the page continues to renew itself. Also, our languages remain quite young because they remain adaptable. We always talk about poetry as a thing that's very old. I tend to think of poetry as comparatively young. Talk to a cosmologist and say, well, yeah, 10,000 years. And they'll say that's nothing, so I tend not to get blue about it. I know right now we're supposed to be very frightened of AI. And I'm not really spending much time, peeking out the window, wondering if AI is going to come and rob us of poetry. There's so much poetry, and I spend so much of my time in classrooms with people who are clearly writing it right there. And I know that there's no shortage of it. I would say, like anything else that you wish to bring into your life, any other form of stillness, be it meditation or communing with nature, I think, if poetry is a thing that's important to you, then it'll be a thing that you can make time for. And if you open the door just a little bit, poetry will find you. And
Brendan, you're brilliant, and that's evident. And you're the ambassador of poetry.
Well, bless you. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for such a great reading. Our next poet is Hélène Cardona. Hélène Cardona is a multilingual poet and actor. She authored 3 collections, including Life in Suspension and Dreaming My Animal Selves, and 5 translations. She received the Independent Press Award and Albertine and FACE Foundation Prize and a Hemingway Grant, among many. She holds an MA in American Lit from the Sorbonne, worked as an interpreter for the Canadian Embassy, and taught at Hamilton College and Loyola Marymount University. Her work has been translated into 20 languages. She is known as an actor for Chocolate, The 100-Foot Journey, Star Trek Discovery, Dawn of the Poet of the Apes, X-Men Apocalypse, Happy Feet 2, Muppets Most Wanted, Serendipity, Starfield, Shattered Space, Emily in Paris, and Upload. Here's a marvelous poet, Hélène Cardona.
Thank you so much, Harry, for bringing me back and this lovely introduction. And I'm just so pleased to be here because being an actor and a poet, I feel I really belong here. So thank you so much. And yes, I'm a polyglot and I straddle different worlds. and also having a literary background and being an actor and a poet and a dream analyst, I wear many hats, and I like inhabiting all these different worlds and how they intersect. I believe in the transformative power of art, and that is what drives my creativity. And so I'm so pleased to be here. And thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing this hour with me. I will start with a poem that will tell you where I'm from. So I'm multilingual, I'm a polyglot, and I write in several languages. So my collections are bilingual. They're in French and in English. So I now write in English, but French is my first language. I speak 6 of them. And so then I go back and forth. And so they're all like this. Maybe like this is easier. With the English and the French together, the text facing each other. And then I also, my mother was Greek. My father was Spanish, and I lived all over Europe, France, Switzerland, Germany, Spain, England, Italy, Wales, and spending, time in Greece as well, etc. So I spoke Spanish at home, early on, and Greek too, and then, learned German and Italian. So I also translate from other languages. And so for me, a way to pay homage to a lot of poets is also to translate them into English or into French or Spanish or whichever is the language. So I'll start with a poem from this collection, Dreaming My Animal Selves, Le songe de mes âmes animales, for the Francophiles. Dancing the Dream. This is a story of flight, a story of roots, a story of grace. I am the wandering child. Every journey knows a secret destination. I'll find my way without a map, rely on memory embedded in my mother's embrace, on stormy nights at the foot of the Alps. I'll find home in the heart of a rose, retrieve my soul, anchored in the still point where Psyche rests. The presence of mystery so luminous, I'm infused with its essence. I walk the labyrinth, let go of confined desires. I rip the vine intertwined around the umbilical, liberate the letters of my name. They soar above the ocean for the falcon to reclaim. I'm dancing the dream on the brink of barren, ravaged realms. From volcanic pumice and pure clay, I reap scrumptious blossoms of love, earth's sweet and savory ambrosia. So I work with dreams a lot, and I use them, I mind them, and I also teach dream workshops in many ways. So they're therapeutic, and you can also use them for creative practice, writing practice. Dreams like water. I trace patterns in dreams through beings disguised, undone like particles broken apart, revealing pieces of me. I pursue elusive sleep in the hope to heal mishaps, the last chance to anchor my boat. So this poem starts with an epigraph by Lewis Carroll. And I like using epigraphs, which is another way I honor poets on whose shoulders I stand today. So this one by Lewis Carroll is Why? Sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. The poem's called Inquisitive Life. My elfin world, lavish, submerged temple, where amid storms and rainbows, all is forgotten. The ocean heralds, when the colossal wave arises, the elephant We'll go on top of the giraffe, and you will know to breathe inside the hollow water. And it happens at the vernal equinox, even if it's hard to believe. This is another poem inspired by dreams and I believe in past lives, and still I have many Celtic past lives. Night messenger. I wake in a meadow braided with wild grasses and flowers. Notes of music drift from a harp. A penguin is running. I follow to the river. He lays on a leaf, lets the current carry him, and says, "This dream is your life. Instead of watching from the meadow, flow with its rhythm." Guided by Scottish pipes, I reach the gate between my past and the waterway. Like the penguin, I lay on a leaf. Let the river transport me, knowing I've entered another world. So another thing that I'm into, that I've also trained in, and that is part of my life, is shamanism and shamanic practice. So I use Jungian interpretation for my dreams combined with shamanic practice. And so this poem is called Pathway to Gifts, and it has an epigraph by a poet I love, H.D. When my soul turned round, perceiving the other side of everything. Pathway to Gifts. Whispers wake me. I return home behind a procession of swans to the island in the heart of Paris. On the cliffs where the wild ones come to show themselves, I sing this whistling song. Look at the other side of the world as if a deck of cards spread out to peek under and flip over for a glimpse at a hidden side. The dreams opens forgotten realms of creation. I think that's what time is. So this poem is called, let me see, Illumination. And well, I'm not finding it. And yes, I am very much in conversation with my ancestors. Both my parents have crossed over. My mom still very young in 96 and my father in 2018. And so I'm in conversation with them and grandparents and ancestors in general. And this poem's called Illumination. Risen out of a deep freeze, webbed feet skimming across the water. My mother imagined I came into being, cold flown through her window. Pain cleaves the skin, allows us to penetrate. Ancestor, now welcome in my body. At sunset, seagulls take flight. Illuminated from within, one carries translucent light that shoots around her, lifts her up, reveals everything is taken care of. It's so easy on the other side. I also like to work with the tarot once in a while. And so this one was a mix of different things. This poem came out of a mix of different things, a meditation, the tarot, and so on. The Magician. Good night. The mellifluous whisper catches me like a vine, wraps itself around my will. I stare at violet eyes, unanswered prayer, key to the music room. I slip out of mind, sucked into the flower fairy. I become a dream. The snow-capped mountains blend into clouds, brushed by wind like whitened sand, haunted Indian landscape. Hypnotic, soothsayer, all the faces buried there, sculpted alive, shape-shifting, urging me, remember who you are. Step outside of time, choose to feed the white wolf. I lie in darkness, engulfed by angels' music, intoxicated with lavender. All is light and legend. I sink deeper, circle higher, and I don't exist. Inside tears after rain, dawn arises. Rays of light flood my wings. Mist and pain dissolve. I burst into joy, melting down all expectation. Strange and unusual, every circumstance. The magician home, I know my structure remains intact and refuses to budge. Thank everyone and everything. I'm still here. The devil, so sweet, I welcome change. The clock untangled at the bottom of the dry slope. Cobra, wolf, and coyote greet me. I'm reborn into a Peruvian horse. And now I'm going to share some poems from this other collection, Life in Suspension, La Vie Suspendue, also bilingual. And very much dedicated to both my parents and this one to my mother, Kitty. And so it has to Kitty, who loved the sea, and Somerset Mom. And so it has an epigraph by E. Cumming. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. To Kitty, who loved the sea, and Somerset Maugham. The angel who smells of my childhood, my mother, piano and oboe, whose face the icon reflects. Auburn hair like a Modigliani, eyes the color of rain, light caught by surprise, whose presence the absence reveals, whose laughter burns snow, whose warm breath I breathed this morning as I woke, the scent of gardenias whispering, I never left you. Woodwork. If I could gather all the sadness of the world, all the sadness inside me, into a gourd, I'd shake it once in a while and let it sing. Let it remind me of who I used to be. Bless it for what it taught me, and stare at it lovingly for not seeping out of its container. So this one too, to my mother, and this also came out. I wrote it after I had a dream of the goddess Ceridwen, a Celtic goddess, and in the dream she was both the goddess Ceridwen and my mother. My mother, Ceridwen, the light on the icon, the way I see her in my dreams, the core of her at the edge of darkness, in a magic cauldron, always full, never exhausted, that brings her back to life, guarded by a golden serpent, coiled in the shape of an egg, the world snake marshalling inner reserves, the seed of a new journey, a glimpse of a mysterious and elusive woman crowned with morning glories. This is how she lands on the page, slanted, looking out in space, integrated within me, save blue sky across her. So this poem, A House Like a Ship, is really how I feel a lot of the time, in between worlds. A house like a ship. I live in a house like a ship, at times on land, at times on ocean. I will myself into existence, surrender, invite grace in. I heed the call of the siren. On the phantom ship, I don't know if I'm wave or cloud, undine or seagull. Lashed by winds, I cling tight to the mast. Few return from the journey. I now wear the memory of nothingness, a piece of white sail wrapped like second skin. There's a poem I'm going to read that's dedicated to my partner, John, who is an extraordinary poet. And actually, it's how we met. I heard him read poetry. Eagle. On the wall of time to come, a window appears. I open it. Let angels in. The vortex in his eye spins me out of myself. Infinity, held in blue iris, closes around me, snatches me in eagle form, reawakens old scars, swallows space and love, dissolves into divine silence. The universe cannot resist a poet like him. This is another poem dedicated to my mother. We went to Maine shortly before she passed away. And it was just such a beautiful trip. And Bar Harbor Island, loved it. And so this one starts with an epigraph from Hafiz. Now it's time to know that all you do is sacred. Twisting the moon. We shared the coast of Maine in June. Hundreds of whales, lobster sandwiches, buttermilk pancakes, and a room in Bar Harbor with antique tub. They're now a cloister of shadows love, goldsmith of the music of time. She left when circumstances met. I dream of offering her strawberries on sacred moon, healed by the beauty of memories, ready to start as if knowing nothing. And I'll finish with two more. Galactic Architect. And this is the one that when Olympia Dukakis gave me a blurb, she lifted it from there. And it also has to do with John. Galactic Architect. From the bottom rung of a ladder in the sky, I hang in the void, ultramarine, is all I need. Let it be simple. Build a cottage for the spirit to rest and soar. I trust, self-contained in equipoise, resources at my fingertips, deep-rooted ghosts supporting the foundation of a throne. To explore and claim whole worlds, surprised to find you here with me, lighting up my life. And I'll finish with a poem called Spellbound. Fall asleep at the lake tonight. No boundaries, like a fairy. I am the eagle song, a calling, light defying gravity, someone to steal horses with, a case of mistaken identity, tears transforming into fish in the air, a force that propels forward, proclaims who I am with a passport from God, her will an explosion, with bullets for words. I offer you everything, stardust, silence, impish grace, and flutes like birdsong, mischievous, good and bad, pulled out of myself into the spell. I ask the unthinkable, move so fast, breathless, delicate craftsmanship. I walk on all fours, elongated, neither human nor animal, a creature you only see in magic. Thank you. Oh, I'll just mention, I am not reading from it today, but there's I also translated my father in this bilingual poetry called Burnham Wood, El Bosque de Vietnam, and it's also English and Spanish. And that was also a way to honor it. And he's from Ibiza, the poem that showed there. That's his native island. And when he passed away, I returned his ashes to his native island to fulfill his wishes. Yeah.
Thank you, Helena, for such a luminous, loving reading. Your poetry is just full of grace and tenderness and wonder. You know, your poetry is just liberating. It's without bounds. So you're amazing. You know, you're just incredible. I love, some of your lines, your poem for your mother, eyes the color of rain, the scent of gardenias whispering, I never left you. Just that boundless between life and death. Just what a wonderful poetry that you've created. I'll ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll ask Brendan to say a couple of things. But let me just ask you one, and then you two can talk to each other. The same question I asked Brendan: what caused you to be a poet?
Yeah, it's actually very, very simple. I mean, I started writing poetry when I was 10. I was surrounded by it because not only was my father a poet, but I grew up in Europe. So we grew up with it. It's just part of our lives. So I was always, having it around me in school. We have to read poetry. It's normal. It's something that's, I just recently wrote an introduction called In Defense of Poetry for a website called The Creative Process. And so I also am an editor, and so I edit on a regular basis for different journals and anthologies and so on. So I invited a number of poets and other artists to contribute, on the theme of creativity. And so basically, poetry's always been there. It was just a major form of communication since antiquity, and this was the way a lot of information was relayed, actually, and so it's part of our DNA. Is the way I look at it. It's just a part of who we are, and it's always around us. Like maybe people don't always realize what has been inspired from poetry in terms of what's created out there in different, in film or whatnot. But a lot of it is drawn from there. So basically, the more you are around it, I think the richer your life is. Basically, it taps into, I think, your subconscious. It's really a way to express things, the unsayable, like poetry and music basically tap directly to the core of who we are. And so I think that it really affects the reader tremendously, because we don't necessarily know what's at work. It's kind of a magic at work. And then you can, spend more time with certain poems and decipher them more, because some have many layers. But really, it's just a way to transmit a number of things, and emotion is definitely one of them. I think it really transports you. Yeah.
I could listen to you both forever. You're just so fabulous, and you transcend just the ordinary and take us each into your own world and then beyond. And so thank you once again, two fantastic poets. I just love your poetry. And next week we have two wonderful poets with us, D.A. Powell and Boris Dralyak. And so Bede goes on with great poetry.